Welcome back as folks are making their way back into the space. Amanda, thanks for your comments. I'm reading Amanda's comment. Thank you for bringing art into this space. We recognize how important it is for people of our community, and this is great to see you feel the same. Jason's art is so powerful and beautiful. Thank you. You know, I think I've heard from a number of you, and I've felt the same having a chance, you know, looking at you, Marco, on my screen, the learning session that we had around art as resistance, as a vehicle for social change and as a bridging instrument was so incredibly powerful. And it's really great to see art increasingly embedded into the work of this network, and appreciate all who kind of helped bring Jason's work into the space today. It is really powerful. And want to introduce you to a colleague and really a friend, Dr. Kimberly Barrett, who I've gotten to know over the last few years, who is from the Fox Cities area in Wisconsin. And Kimberly, for the last 30 years, has been really a leader, leading voice in the areas of diversity, equity, and inclusion and belonging across a lot of sectors, across in academia and businesses and across not-for-profits and in communities, and have gotten to know some of her work as she's been a civic leader, as a volunteer, thinking about bridging and belonging. So I think, Kimberly, you're going to share a little bit around what does this look like from your own personal experiences? What does it look like in the context of community and grounding us in some practices around bridging and belonging, as Liz pointed out, which has been both a core value, goal, and practice of this network. It'll be fun to kind of hear what that looks like in a different community and a different voice. So welcome, Kimberly.
Well, thank you so much, Monty. And I'm especially, happy to have the opportunity to talk to this group, not only to share some of the civic work that I've been doing with Imagine Fox Cities, but also to help people understand why this is so important to me on a personal basis. So I'm going to take a minute and share my screen if I can. I have a few PowerPoints. Let's see here. Slideshow. Okay, great. So bridging and belonging, keys to creating more just communities. And as I've heard, you all are well on the way to really making significant change in your communities. You know, I always like to start with thinking about structures. And I'm preaching to the choir when it comes to that. You all probably are well aware of this, well-known saying by Audre Lorde, for the master's tools will never dismantle the master's house. They will allow us to temporarily beat him at his own game, but they will never enable us to bring about genuine change. And I think what you all are trying to do with your targeted universalism, with the work that you're doing in your communities, is bring about genuine change, to move us from a paradigm of competition and even holding people who are different in contempt, to one where we are focused on collaboration and compassion that really sort of enables us to work with each other in ways that acknowledge and honor our common humanity across our differences. Let's see here. So just a little bit about my journey. This is me. And, I've always been a person who has been somewhat the odd person out. I was born, I'm dating myself now, in the midst of the civil rights movement. So I've always been in integrated schools. My father was in the Army, lived in integrated neighborhoods. And so I was always, one of a few, if not the only, in school, in leadership positions, that kind of thing. And so early on, although I always thought that, the world was my oyster, so to speak, I always felt like I had to create spaces and would change spaces that I moved into. And that's why this James Baldwin quote, when I talk about and think about belonging, really resonates with me. The place in which I will fit will not exist until I make it. And so this idea of co-creating belonging has always been something that I've understood from a childhood, even though I didn't have the words for it until graduate school, probably. And when you run into the glass ceilings and the systemic discrimination in the workplace, your perspective changes a bit. And then I began to get the theory and the language in graduate school to describe some of those issues. But in addition to, my growing up in the South during the Civil Rights Movement, being very hopeful about change and taking for granted, this myth of the meritocracy. Also, as an adult, my partner was someone who, people assumed to be white. And then, much to my surprise, I had a little blonde baby boy, which also sort of contributed to my deeper understanding of issues of belonging, the need to bridge, and also the social construction of race. And in fact, one of the reasons why I was so, I was so grateful for this opportunity is my husband is actually an elder in the Samish Indian Nation, and my son is a citizen. And so, even though we've never lived in Washington State, we've really been made to feel like we belong as part of that community with all of the communications that we received from the Samish. So thank you if there's anyone out there from that community. We really feel like we belong, even though we are, many, many miles away. Again, as I think about my experiences growing up, this Herman Hesse quote, it's never really been about becoming somebody other than who I am. I've always embraced my uniqueness, but I've always been open to recognizing other people and acknowledging the value in what they have, and maybe even being influenced by that and part of becoming who I will be, one day. So this Herman Hesse quote really resonates with me, and I actually used it as part of my renewing of the vows with my husband in our 10-year wedding anniversary. So just a little bit about me there. And that was my son as a child. Here's my son at his wedding photo. Just thought I'd let you get a look at him as an adult. I'm very proud of him, obviously, and he's certainly part of my journey and understanding the struggles with belonging and bridging that we all go through. So just so we can be clear, again, I know that I am speaking to the choir here, but just so that we're clear and have the same understanding of what we're talking about, I thought we should quickly go through some terms. Belonging is really about knowing that you matter to a group of which you are a part. It's being valued for what you contribute and embraced for who you are, your authentic self. It's understanding your agency and the influence within the group. And this last part about understanding your agency was really driven home to me by the work of the Othering and Belonging group. When I looked at their materials, we always talk about valuing folks and feeling part of community, but also there's a critical piece in understanding your own agency, which is part of belonging, that you can really sort of impact the group. And it's really sort of an affective or emotional consequence of truly being included. And to me, what helps me operationalize this idea of belonging, which can really seem sort of nebulous, is the work that's been done on mattering. And there's been a lot of work done with adult students in higher education on mattering. And it really impacts how folks are willing to engage with the community. And it's about ego extension. It's about not only feeling valued, but also knowing that people are depending on you. And when you succeed, they'll be happy. And if you fail, they're going to be right there, lifting you up and sort of mourning that loss with you. It really is a way of recognizing our interdependence. So mattering to me is a way to really sort of operationalize what it means to belong, that ego extension and that interdependence that is part of belonging. And then bridging is a critical tool to making that connection that is so essential to belonging. And if you've heard from John Powell, I'm sure you've heard about bridging. And it's really sort of how do you make meaningful connections with an individual or group that you believe is different from you in some significant way for some common good, some common purpose that you have. And it could be, just understanding, cultural diversity better, or it could be a common problem like some of the issues that you all are working on, like the opioid crisis or food insecurity. And the focus is not on persuasion or changing people's mind. It's really about listening and learning from each other. And ironically, if you're familiar with the research on changing folks' mind, the way to do that most effectively is to begin by learning. So bridging is an important skill that is essential for creating a environment in which belonging exists. And so what I'm going to talk about, I'm going to give you some examples from Imagine Fox Cities, again, just quickly, but really want to focus on what it is as individuals we can do. We talk a lot about things theoretically with systems, but systems are made up of individuals. And so we're the ones who are going to have to change the practice and change the way things are done through an everyday practice of inclusion and belonging. So as you've probably heard from Monty, Imagine Fox Cities, it's a regional visioning initiative, and it's focused on well-being and growing the region's prosperity through focusing on community vitality. It was a initiative that was created by community members. We consulted with national experts like Monty and Stacy, and we used data to shape a vision for our community. We did an initial survey of more than 3,000 folks and 80 focus groups to come up with the vision initially. And then we just recently finished our second survey and look at well-being, last year, and we were just sharing the results a few months ago. We're about to go into a series of convenings later this month. Let's see here. I'm sorry, I'm having trouble with my cursor. Okay. So the vision that was developed from that first set of data and a convening of more than 300 people, from high school students to community leaders, was based on 4 pillars: a positive path for kids, an economy that works for all, and widely shared spaces and culture, as well as a place where all belong. And the belonging really stood out because if we were looking at the economy, if we were looking at mental health, if we were looking at education, the thing that bubbled up in our convenings in all of those things was that people really felt like inclusion and belonging was a key to creating a better future together, to make sure that we all prosper and experience well-being. Okay. And so you all are familiar with the vital conditions. One of our survey items in the 2019 survey looked at, the 2021 survey looked at what creates well-being. And of course, one of the big factors, not surprisingly, was this issue of belonging. So we also asked, what is the biggest hindrance that keeps people from experiencing well-being? And also belonging, health, and safety, again, were the most significant factors. And so we had already identified this as a need. And so right before the pandemic, we set up a working group, a committee on belonging, which I co-chaired with a gentleman from Kimberly Clark. And we had a variety of members interested in different constituencies, BIPOC, youth, elderly. And we came up with a purpose to really try to serve as a catalyst to help people understand this idea of belonging. What are the needs? How can we make sure that everyone sees themselves reflected in the work that we're doing in Imagine Fox Cities and, throughout the region? And then we also had some objectives, so that we can measure it as we went along to educate the community about what it means to belong, provide opportunities for engagement and activities that sort of promote these underlying, conditions for belonging, empathy, trust, mutual understanding, and cooperation. Because as you can imagine, the number one thing that, inhibits belonging is this idea of distrust. And we've had, centuries of distrust among various communities that make up the Fox cities in the United States, the Americas. So what are some examples of the things that we've done to create a sense of belonging? These won't be surprising to you. We had convenings the summer after the murder of George Floyd. We had a virtual convening on anti-racism, belonging, and community. We had over 800 people register for that in this sort of more rural Wisconsin area. We had, I'd say, over 600 people who actually consistently, stayed with us for that half-day convening. We've also had a number of dialogues dealing, we used the living room conversations model as sort of a template, but then put our own information in it to look at, we had a series of 3 that were race, anti-racism, and inclusion. And then we also had a series on social status, which looked at privilege, class, and bridging. And then finally, we looked at belonging. We thought it was really important for people to understand these sort of fundamental topics before we, talked about how they all can inhibit or contribute belonging. We also are looking at how can we assess this idea of belonging, and we came up with a working definition for belonging that basically had 3 parts: feeling part of community, valued for who you are and what you bring. And so we have a few items that we're using on surveys to try and assess that. And then we're collaborating, doing some important collaboration with other communities. We also had a convening on policing. So a 3-part convening on that, and have been in collaboration with some of our police departments and their advisory boards. But we're also working with our Multicultural Communications Committee that really stood up again right around the time of the pandemic and ended up doing vaccination clinics, but also works to make sure that people have critical information about services just in time, that also celebrates the culture and is culturally responsive. So those are some of the things, just some examples of what we're doing in the Fox cities. There's a lot going on there. Another huge initiative is an initiative called Common Ground, which is another sort of difficult dialogue groups that has looked at race, political difference, religious differences, and even most recently had a dialogue around abortion, around the abortion issue. So, so really trying to do these very relevant opportunities for people to build the skills to have the difficult dialogue. One of the things that we thought was important was we don't have the opportunity these days to talk to people who think differently, because we not only are segregated in schools where we live, where we worship, we also are segregated in terms of ideology. And so we thought it was important to provide opportunities for people to have skill building, safe places to do this skill building and to bridge. And then nationally, of course, there's a number of initiatives from the Other and Belonging Institute, You all have, embraced targeted universalism. There's also online bridging courses that are happening. And I wonder from you all, what are some of the other things that are going on that you're aware of that create a sense of belonging? Do you mind putting in, I'd like for you, if you don't mind, to take a second and just put in the chat some of the things that you're aware of, because there's lots of things that are going on out there to try and create a sense of belonging that center the voices of the marginalized, and also provide some opportunities for us to engage with difference in ways that we don't normally have the opportunity to do. Can we just take 2 seconds and put those in the chat? I'm going to look at the chat for just a second here. Human library, yeah. Wonderful. Great. So lots of things going on. And, I think that just to lift up this idea of art as a bridge, often we can sort of illustrate things that are difficult to put into words through art. So thank you for that session during our break. Let's see now. So let's talk a little bit more about bridging and the art of bridging. To me, there's courses on it. There's a playbook that, Greater Good Science Center has on it. But I think we all have the ability within us, just if we have a bit of courage, humility, kind curiosity, and compassion, with the commitment to connect. But there does take some preparation. When you think about bridging, you think about it as something that you're doing externally with people. It's an interpersonal thing, but there's a lot of interpersonal work that needs to happen as well. As we prepare to bridge. Bridging isn't for everybody. I think for most of it's a good thing, and we all need to have the skills, but it's not always appropriate. You risk being rebuffed. People might not want to bridge with you. The people you want to bridge with you risk having some strong emotional reactions. You also risk being changed. And so, you can't get too caught up in the righteousness of your own path if you want to bridge. So here's some things that you need to keep in mind as you prepare to bridge. Think about ways to mitigate your implicit biases, deepen your emotional intelligence, both your ability to understand your own feelings and other people's feelings, and then practice mindfulness. And if any of you are familiar with the research on mindfulness, it really seems that it's able to help us diminish our biases in many ways. Our biases, like our correspondence bias, our negativity bias, our self-positivity bias that we all have, let alone it makes us slow down so that we don't sort of act automatically on these associations we have that create the stereotypes that really sort of influences our decision and our behavior in very negative ways. So mindfulness, I think, is a very powerful part of preparing ourselves for being able to bridge. And of course, external work determine your intentions. If it's to listen and learn and connect, then you're good. Expand your social circles, Again, many of us live in situations and work in situations where there's not a lot of diversity. So we need to expand that, get out of our comfort zone. And then we need to practice compassionate communication, both listening and speaking, and try to avoid, violent communication. So I want to stop for a minute, and I'm going to ask you all to participate in an activity with me that really is an example of mindfulness and how you might begin to cultivate a mindset for bridging. And I think there are two kinds of meditations or mindfulness activities that are particularly helpful in this regard. One of them is called a loving kindness meditation, which I'm sure some of you have heard of, and there's all kinds of versions of them, running from 6 minutes to 40 minutes. We're going to do a short one right now, just to give you a taste of it. And the other one is gratitude. And I've heard today a lot of, expressions of gratitude and appreciation, but making that part of a daily practice of mindfulness is important as well for cultivating a mindset for bridging. And so I'm going to ask you to put your feet on the floor, and if you're able and willing to just close your eyes, and sitting in a comfortable upright position, put feet on the floor and begin to bring your awareness inward. Take a couple of deep breaths in and then let them out slowly. Now, breathing normally, turn your attention to your breath. With each breath, relax your body, beginning with your face, your neck, your shoulders, your arms, your chest, your stomach, your legs, all the way down to your feet. Now think of someone you love. It can be a friend, a family member, or a romantic partner. Picture them standing at your side with their hand on your shoulder. That person is sending you wishes for your well-being, health, and happiness. Feel the warmth and caring come to you from that person. Send the love you feel back to them by silently repeating the following phrases. Just as I wished you, may you live with ease, may you be safe, may you be free from pain. Just as I wished you, may you live with ease, may you be safe, may you be free from pain. Just as I wished you, may you live with ease, may you be safe, and may you be free from pain. Now imagine that you are surrounded by people who you have loved and who have loved you. Take a moment to bask in the emotional warmth of the love and kindness that surrounds you. Now, keeping your eyes closed, bring your mind back to this place and imagine the people in this Zoom room with you, both the individuals you know well and the ones with whom you are casually acquainted. These people are like you. They wish to be happy. Send them love and warm wishes by silently repeating the following phrases. Just as I wished you, may you live with ease, may you be safe, may you be free from pain. Just as I wished to, may you live with ease, may you be safe, may you be free from pain. Just as I wish to, may you live with ease, may you be safe, may you be free from pain. Now picture a person with whom you have conflict or dislike. That person and you are alike. Just like you, they wish to be happy. Share loving kindness with that person by silently repeating the following phrases. Just as I wish to. May you live with ease. May you be safe. May you be free from pain. Just as I wish to. May you live with ease. May you be safe. May you be free from pain. Just as I wish to. May you live with ease. May you be safe. And may you be free from pain. Now expand your awareness to the entire planet. Picture a globe filled with all the living things on Earth, particularly those who might be suffering. Remember the feelings of peace and contentment you felt when surrounded by loved ones. Send these feelings of compassion to all living beings around the world who, like you, want to be happy by silently repeating the following. Just as I wish to. May you live with ease. May you be safe. May you be free from pain. Just as I wish to. May you live with ease. May you be safe. May you be free from pain. Just as I wish to. May you live with ease. May you be safe. May you be free from pain. Now bring your attention back to your breath. Put your hands on your heart. Take a deep breath in and let it out slowly. Notice how you feel in this moment. When you're ready, you can open your eyes. Let's go back. So that's just a quick, example of a mindfulness exercise. And research indicates that if you do something like this, try to do it every day, a few times a week, for 12, 15 minutes, that you can really see significant changes, not only in your own sort of focus and attention and intentionality, but also your ability to be compassionate towards others and to really have the mindset to empathize and connect and to listen without judgment, which is what compassionate listening is all about. Okay, so what I'd like to do is to spend some time, give you all just a chance to spend some time talking in small groups about your experiences with bridging and belonging. As I said earlier, I know that I'm speaking to the choir, and I know you all have some things to share. And so I'd like to take about 15 minutes for you to discuss 3 questions. So can I get some volunteers, folks, to share some insights or even some strategies that they talked about in their groups? And I'm gonna probably close the. We have about 5 minutes. Great. Okay, great. I'm gonna try to stop sharing. Can I stop sharing my screen? I want to do my next, okay, let me share my screen here. And let me finish it up. And I'd like to see you all on the screen again. So insights and reflections and my thank you. So if we can I'll stop sharing my screen, and then if we can see as many people as possible on the screen. Era?
Yes, it's pronounced Aura, just for clarification. Very phonetic, Aura. So one of the things we talked about in terms of belonging and bridging, I just wanted to share one of my insights that I had shared in my group was in the time of just learning about DEIB just like the realm, the professional like realm of it all, one of the things that I've really had to unlearn, and I think that's something we don't put enough emphasis on when we're doing DEIB work or equity or inclusion belonging, we have to unlearn a lot. And one of the things I've had to unlearn was who created these systems in the first place, and who said I have to work within these systems? Who says that I cannot think up of something new to work outside? Who said the pie was only this big? Who said the table was only this big? Like, it certainly didn't have my input, and historically it did not have a lot of input from a lot of the folks I'm seeing here. So I think unlearning this is the box you have to work within, and realizing, oh, I can just open the door and step out of that box. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, I think it's a multi-pronged approach where I do love working within these existing systems, because I believe that internal change can happen. And at the same time, empowering folks to come up with new ideas and create systems outside of what outside of what already exists. And it could be a variety of things. It could be an internal agency, could be your local government. It could be like, just like how a certain policy has been put in place, but realizing, oh, it's so much bigger than what we've been told, and feeling empowered in that way. That is the kind of power that's how I want to bridge that gap. Creating more feelings of belonging, creating these feelings of like, I am empowered. I can actually do this. I don't have to stick within the box. And then moving forward from that. So like, one of the things I really work with is becoming a conduit of power. As I have platforms to speak, just like here, I want to make sure it's like, I have a message, I want to empower others, and let's pass it along. Like, I am not here to accumulate power for myself. And so shifting that mindset of power means something that will corrupt you to power is something that can be shared and is infinite has been so beneficial in helping bridge those connections and also empower those feelings of belonging. Especially when you don't see other people who don't look like you or share your lived experience, which happens to me like 95% of the time.
Right. Great. Thank you. Aura. Did I get it right? Okay. Thank you. Who else? That was such a powerful point. We need to take a moment and digest it all, but thank you so much for that. Unlearning. We talk about learning, and that's important, but unlearning these systems. Thank you. Two participants raised their hand. Okay, Beverly and then Nicole.
Yeah, well, we had, Aura, thank you so much. We had some similar conversation with different words in our group, and it would have been wonderful if we could have had some of those words in Spanish as well. Really appreciating the part about what has already created this gathering, and in our continual gatherings is the economic privilege and the time to have this, this ability to connect with one another that is very unique, and it is exclusive, and we're speaking English, we're doing it in a timely and articulate way, and that we don't have other means of communication and connecting, and that's partly Zoom and COVID, but also what we have built and created. So there are ways that we're still being exclusive or exclusionary that we have to keep looking at. So I am always telling myself I've been socialized, and I'm continuing to unlearn that socialization. I have those, inherent traits of what I heard from my mom and dad or whatever. So those are the pieces that we were talking about as well within ours. So do we even need to have that table that we gather at, or do we build a new table together?
Mm-hmm. Great. Thank you. Thank you. Nicole.
Yeah, we three of us struggled with actually the first question, feeling like, have we ever felt truly belong? Like, have we belonged somewhere? And how surprisingly, kind of triggering that is of like, why is that? And what's the history of that? And I think that also made us very good of like, we have strategies for the third question of approaches that we have found helpful, because maybe perhaps we would like those. And I think there was a good consensus. Number 3 feels like one-on-one human interaction. Number 2 is more feels like organizationally, how do we embrace newcomers? And that perhaps, Beth, what did you say? We're not bad at it. We're not ready for it.
Growth mindset, Nicole.
Growth
We're not
mindset.
there yet.
We're not there. That's what you said. Thank you. So I even saw that question prepping for this. I work for the ACH and I'm thinking like, that is a hard question. And Beth was saying the same thing. So I just wanted to call that one out.
Great. Do we have time for one more comment, Monty? Okay. Who had Vanessa?
Hi, thank you for this space. I just wanted to say, I also work for North Sound ACH, and I just really appreciate the first conversation, and thank you for calling that out to both of you. And I think number one was mostly like I shared, it was about me. You know, growing up, I'm a Latina, I'm Indigenous, I'm also Scottish. I have a very Scottish last name. So not having that belonging, I code switched a lot, right? Whichever family I was visiting, I was code switching. And that code switching is, I was very Latina with my Latino family, and I was very Indigenous with my Indigenous family. And when I was with, I, didn't have many, like we didn't embrace the Scottish side, but it was all sorts of code switching. So as I learned, and as I've grown in ACH, and just as a person, I've learned to accept that those three things are not separate of me, but they are all of me. So when I start doing that, I started to feel that I belonged. And so when I started to gain that power, I was like, well, I belong everywhere then, because I'm all three things, and I'm human, and I'm a female, and I have all these powerful parts of me. And part of that was a father who just said, you have, instead of saying, sometimes fathers can be like, make yourself smaller, just to protect us. But he was like, you have four amazing things. You're Mexican, you're Indigenous, you're a woman, you're this, and, and it was very like, find your voice. So as I'm growing in my space and as my person and belonging to myself, I can have space and allow, maybe not allow is the right word, but to just provide space for people to belong to me and me to them. And that's what's causing that co-creation and that belonging, because I belong to them and they belong to me, because I come to that space authentically. And I just would love for somebody to come into that space with me authentically. And that gets really woohoo for people, very like, oh, I don't like that. That's not very good. And I accept that. And I try not to push my like really that big space of that, but just the strategy of belonging to myself to belong to other people is that bridging. And I think no matter what you do in life, whether it's your career, your relationships, your coworkers, and anything, I think once you create that space for yourself, you can create it anywhere you go. And for me, that's super important.
What a wonderful last comment. I really appreciate that. That's what it's all about. Being authentically who you are, and inviting other folks in, and so really appreciate that. And one thing we need to remember is, and we talked about this in the group I was in, unfortunately I wasn't somebody's group as a facilitator, but one of the things that we talked about was the fact that this is a learning process. We're unlearning. And sometimes we have to learn before we know what we need to unlearn, but it's a process of growth and development. I heard the growth mindset, and that we're never really going to get there. We're going to get better and better and closer approximations to where we need to be. But it's always, change is going to continue to happen, and we're going to continue to need to grow. It's an iterative process. And so, I just want to say, keep that in mind. Allow some space for grace for yourself, and for other folks as we, work together.
And I'm also Samish too, Kimberly. Thank you. I was going to also say that when you said, I was like, oh, we're cousins.
Yes.
We're family.
Yes. Yes. Well, thank you. Thank you for that. This has been a pleasure.
Kimberly, can I just ask, do you have a hard stop right now? Or did she already jump off?
Sorry. No, I'm here. No, I was having trouble with mute.
Only, and again, we can let everyone go. There was a question that was posed like right around 4 o'clock in the chat box for you specifically. I just didn't know if you had some time
Sure,
to try and
sure.
respond to that before.
Sure. I didn't see it. Let's see. Do you have it up?
I do. It's before everyone started putting their music in. It's from Mateo, so I'll just read it.
Okay.
Kimberly, when you talk about belonging to a group, is that based off of identity and or shared knowledge / analysis? I'm also curious, how do you generate belonging in a space where the inclusion of one group automatically creates othering for another?
Well, those are all complicated, issues and layers, because belonging is sort of multidimensional. And I think that, first of all, I think, centering people who have less power, have been marginalized, is one way to address that. But I think this idea of authenticity, non-judgment, because I think all of us have to come to that space with some non-judgment and being open to be in that space. Yeah, let me look at the question again. That's a layered question. And so Mateo, if you're on, could you do a follow-up? I can stay for a few more minutes if folks can. I can stay until 6:15. Let's try and not to belabor the point.
Yeah.
Just for clarity, that'll be 4:15 on our side of the world.
I'm sorry. Yeah, no, we don't want to keep it
Because
going for
otherwise,
2 hours.
we'll take advantage of the whole extra 2 hours.
No, that's okay. Yeah, so I'm sorry, Mateo, if you could just clarify. I think that when you talk about belonging, there's sort of our aspirational belonging and our current state belonging, right? And so you need to provide, you all have heard of roots and wings. So you need to provide spaces, or, where people feel, groups where they feel like they can be who they are. They don't have to explain themselves now. And then there are aspirational spaces where we all should feel, included. This sort of universal design of our communities and our spaces, quite literally. But why could you we actually probably experienced that with some of our the dialogues with the police. We had to create space for folks who have been traumatized, by their interactions with the police, not to be part of the bridging dialogue, so providing a different space for those folks to have input. And then we were the bridge, we were the conduit for those folks and their concerns. I don't know if that, can you say a little bit more about what you were asking?
Sure, glad to try. I'm happy to try.
Okay.
Yeah, and so I think for me, right, in my understanding of this work, is that like belonging is both, right, based off of identity and shared knowledge and analysis. And when I think shared knowledge, some folks tend to call that like lived expertise or similar like lived experiences. And I also think, right, shared analysis is like viewing systems critically, right? I'm not suggesting group think where everyone thinks the same, right? But having an understanding that kind of what Ara was naming, right? Like there is this shared understanding of how systems are operating, right? And then the history of those systems is also important to know. And I think, right, certain folks' identities identities can also be a way of generating a sense of belonging, right? But it's neither just one or the other. I think it is both of those things. And I think because a lot of folks here don't share, right, identities and do not share lived experiences and analysis, I'm not saying that we haven't, right? But no two in the same. And so I think there's always a sense of othering that happens in a lot of these groups. yeah, and so a lot came up for me there as we were talking about belonging.
Mhm.
And I
Yeah,
think, sorry, I
Go
think
ahead.
particularly for me as well, like with the identities and experiences that I hold, right? Like I don't see other like queer, brown, like non-binary, gender non-conforming, like people on a call who grew up in poverty, right? Who did X, Y, and the third in the same region. And I think, right, I don't know that I will feel the same sense of belonging as someone who hasn't had those identities or experiences. So I think that's where that question comes from, and happy to speak to the other one as well.
Yeah, I think that to me, that's where the co-creation comes in, where we have to do the work of belonging and the work of bridging. And there's belonging isn't something that the type of belonging we're talking about isn't something that is necessarily automatic. It's something that we do have to create, and it's not just existing, particularly given the world that we live in today. And so that's why we have to be very intentional about creating it. I think that there are some limits in terms of bridging, whether or not you are ready to bridge or should bridge, or it's a thing that would be beneficial for you. But I think that belonging is active, and it's something that is we have to create together. So I'm kind of going around in circles. Does anybody else have something they'd like to add to that? But I hear you and I understand what you're saying, and I think that until we create this better society, sometimes we have to, that's why it's a both and, the roots and wings, building people up with folks, creating spaces for folks with similar identities and experiences, so that then, they can then help change places and spaces where they don't belong. So, and they're not doing that alone. You might want to have the last word on that.
No, I just want to thank you, and thank you, Mateo, for raising the question, and thank you, Kimberly, for staying on. Oh, wait, Marco and Ara both want to jump in. I see two more hands.
Okay.
We've got 5 more minutes of Kimberly's time to use, so go, Marco.
Thank you, Kimberly, and thank you, Mateo. That's an important question. I just wanted to, Kimberly, just ask you real quick. Did you say the roots and wings? Is that what you said?
Yeah, roots and wings. The idea that sort of providing spaces where people can be with people that they identify with, based on who they are, their experiences, that kind of thing. And then wings sort of then together, based on that supportive feeling and feeling validated, being able to help change, fly into the larger institutions and change them. So roots and wings. So grounding, feeling supported, and then wings to help make that change in spaces where you wouldn't, automatically feel like you belong.
Ara, do you want to jump on?
Yeah, just because I'm a chatty Cathy, and this is just like sparking a lot of thoughts in my brain, especially because of Mateo's question. And going back to Kimberly's point, where we have to create those spaces, it goes all the way back to that quote at the beginning, right, by James Baldwin. We have to carve out these spaces for ourselves for 2 reasons. One, if you are like from a historically marginalized community and you have all these different intersecting identities, more than likely there is not a space built for you. And so as we continue to work up in the IB, and there are platforms where people like me, queer people of color, and other folks, Indigenous folks, BIPOC folks, like all of a sudden there is this opportunity within these systems that we all like exist within, our agencies, our like workplaces, where, hey, we want to focus specifically on elevating these historically marginalized communities. So we need someone from that lived experience. We are finally, for the first time in history, I'm going to say, having these platforms of leadership. So in order for us to create, like we're moving forward with no blueprint here. So we have to create the spaces and define them clearly. This is what belonging means. We're not going to have clear-cut answers. And as we continue building and really, really strengthening that idea of like, this is what belonging means in this space, then it will empower others to, hey, I can do that too. Hey, I can step up. oh, look at this. This is a system I used to think was this way, but now it's been changed. So right now we're creating that foundation to create better opportunities of belonging with historically marginalized communities. And also to talk about the second point, what if someone's inclusion in that space of belonging means like, so another group is going to be an outsider, right? Part of creating that space of belonging is having those community guidelines, making sure that if you are entering that space, including this space, you are ready to hear some hard truths. You're going to be listening to a lot of folks who are talking about the harm they have felt, about not feeling like they belong. It's going to be hard. If you want to be an accomplice, you have to be okay with that. You have to be okay with those feelings of discomfort.
Right.
And if you're not ready for that unlearning, if you're not ready for that relearning, then you shouldn't be approaching that space. And that's really hard. That is a really hard point to come to, as like we see other folks who want to be allies, who want to be accomplices. So that's also a lot of the foundational work. But if you're going to enter there as a person with a lot of privilege, you got to be ready to take a back seat. You got to be ready to be like, I want to make sure you are actively involved in making sure that you are creating that space of belonging and making sure that your presence does not exclude others. And that's a lot of personal learning that needs to happen. And that can be really, really difficult. And I want to acknowledge the difficulty of that situation. So for folks here who show up as accomplices and wanting to move this work forward, awesome. If you're not really ready to move that work forward, then maybe you should just maybe the space isn't for you. But a lot of that belonging work, really, it's starting with us. And that's hard when we don't have any other, what are we gonna compare it to?
Right.
There's nothing historically that we can. So let's make it a place where we get to define who feels like they belong. We get to define that space. So we really just have to take that agency into our hands. And I know that's like a non-answer and kind of a little hard to like swallow, but I really think that's where we are. That's the work we have to do here.
I think it's the only answer that you can give. You did it much more articulately than I did. So, so I think it's a very good answer because it's a work in progress. So, yeah. Great.
Yeah, and I'm gonna probably repeat what's already been said, but as a brown woman who grew up in extreme poverty in the Bronx, who came from an incredibly diverse family, who is a lesbian, who had both child by birth and kids that I've adopted. There's never been a place that looks like me. And so, we've had earlier conversations about whether safe spaces. There has like never been a safe space. And I so appreciated last month when, Mariana suggested we needed brave spaces instead of safe spaces. I think that's the piece that keeps me going and wakes me up every day, is the opportunity, Mateo or Marco, to create that space. Because I don't think somebody's got a model for us to use.
Right.
But I think there's an opportunity for us to create a new model. And we may stumble. And I'm gonna keep hearing Ben Duncan in my head, fail forward. But there wasn't a model for me when I was 25. There wasn't a model for me when I was 40. But I just look at the folks who are still on this call and I think, but we can create that. Mm-hmm. And it's going to be hard and it's going to be messy. But I don't know, I have a lot of confidence. Every time you all stay on a call after we told you could hang up, I just I get more confident that we can do this. But just thank you. I appreciate this so much. And there's a lot more that I'm going to probably carry for the next 2 hours, but Kimberly, thank you for staying on with us. And
and I want to thank Mateo for that question that really gets at the nuance of this work. So thank you.
Thank you all. Great appreciation. Bye-bye.
See you tomorrow.